So it's okay, 1 more minute. Okay, it's started. From the previous week, let's see. Hey, so welcome everyone. I created a bunch of items in the agenda related to the status check. Feel free to add anything that you guys might be interested in discussing about. The main items I think of importance is the Galley MCP work and making sure for landing 1-1. So that's in that list. And then we can discuss about if anybody is interested in the new API governance model. What we are trying to start is like there's some documents links from like the previous week. I created a spreadsheet for tracking some of the change check-ins to the new to the API depot, and I'm planning to do the same thing for the CIDs as well. So today I'm going to go ahead and send this to a review discussion list so that we can get started on looking at things. There's a couple of items that need to follow. Essentially, what I'm going to try to do is from 1.0 to 1.1, what are the API changes and are they breaking, or is there a particular concern that needs to be called out? So the link to the spreadsheet is in the meeting notes. Okay, so okay, let's start with the Galley stuff. So here's the current set of issues that we have for the config side, right? So this is the decomposition. So this one, the Galley v1, ensure that MCP-based config distribution is controlled via Helm calc. I thought we already had this, right? So can we close this one?
Can you scroll up?
Sure.
Yes, we have an Helm option for that today.
Okay.
You see how we could close it.
Is there anything that we need to do for this that you're aware of?
The only thing that we don't do today is we can close. Yeah, we can close.
So there's a new issue coming in for Galley pod crashes when using a different namespace. This is because of a configuration problem.
I haven't looked into it.
Okay. Do you mind if I sign this to you? I think this is set to the
Yeah.
the validation webhook, I think. All right. So we have the file system watch code PR in review, so this should make it into 1.1. So on the 4871 and the immediate repush of NAX, so do you have a PR for that, or is it?
That's the other thing I'm working on today.
Okay. And then how about the initial MCP response for new streams?
I'm doing it all at the same time.
Okay. So these should go in before the branch cutoff, or maybe right after?
If not before, shortly after.
Okay. All right, so Galley fails with bunch of unstructured. So this, I think there are two issues here. So maybe I can try to take a look at this tomorrow. Do you have any context on this that we can add to the book? Okay.
I haven't looked at it.
Okay.
I was planning to. I wanted us to get all of the features for before the branch is cut, and then any non-critical bug, we will deal with that, and any others that come up in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Because we don't hit that, we don't hit that issue in our testing environment, so it's environmental, and it's going to tend to take up a lot of time.
Okay. Deprecate Istio cuddle CRUD and introduce a new validate subcommand.
Yeah, so that's on track. Istio, the validate command is in. The only thing we need to do now is to make announcements.
Okay. Announcements. Documentation, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, so in the, well, yeah. We'll announce in the release notes, we'll send an email to Istio users.
Okay.
And then create a follow-up issue to remind us to actually delete everything for 1.2.
Okay. So for re-enable Kubernetes adapter validation, was this because of, I think this was an ordering issue, right? During deployment?
Yes, we should be able, that should be fairly straightforward. To,
Okay.
should just be a YAML file change. We disabled the referential integrity checks already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where what we were hitting here.
Okay. So on the telemetry side, we have the metrics for the server, metrics for the client. We are lacking metrics for Galley, right? That's
right. So that should be landing today or tomorrow.
okay. Flight metrics for Galley itself, and span tracing and log scopes. These are in
Log scopes we could also, we'll get in for 1.1. Span tracing, we're going to ignore for now.
one second.
We'll clean up the log scopes. That's a straightforward change.
Mhm.
So I'd say that's in flight.
Span tracing should be simple also, right?
I haven't looked into it,
Okay.
or Daniel hasn't looked into it yet.
Okay.
So I told him we want to get the metrics in, we want to get the log scopes in. Both of those are fairly straightforward and isolated. The span tracing is not as critical right now.
Okay. So Istio cuddle bug doesn't honor conditional chart dependencies.
Yeah, I think we should just delete that command. Especially since, so now the flow we have is we're using Helm, install on template, and the only thing Istio cuddle would do is help verify the install. But that's experimental.
Okay, but we're already planning a tool for verification. Right?
You're right, that's what I'm referring to. So we have that tool for verification,
Yeah. Okay.
and that's experimental. Gen deploy arguably should have also been experimental.
Okay. So we discussed about this, allow individual API group and version for each config resource kind in private config store. We essentially need to, so all of the API group or CRD handling is going to move to Galley in 2 release time, like within 2 releases. I think that's the right time to start moving things out of the namespaces and the different API groups and move them to the new ones. Mainly because for Galley, this is just a config change, right? It is almost trivial. For other parts, like this is this is a lot of work trying to, do the backwards compatible change, do the merging and, those kinds of things. So I'm really tempted to just move this to 1.2. Any objections in that sense?
There's some, yeah. I think how much we need to announce this, of what our plans are, if that's captured in it's documented in the issue or not. Telling people that we will be.
Okay.
I guess we can do that for 1.2. So not making any functional change for 1.1.
New API groups. Deprecate old ones is real. Okay. One, two. Okay, so this is a documentation incremental upgrade from legacy config model to the new NCP model. This is almost like no, but I think you should just.
It's a documentation thing.
Even as a documentation, it's essentially flipped a bit. Just for, yeah, I mean, we need to document more, explain MCP more, and.
I have to explain what bit to flip in what order.
True, but I think that we had only one.
No, you flip a bit and then you have to tell Pilot to make sure that in a fresh install, it's a bit.
Yeah.
If you had an existing
deployment
and you don't want it to have it break catastrophically, or you want to minimize downtime, there is ordering.
Okay. Yeah.
Galley, then you do a rolling restart of Pilot.
Okay, that's fair enough. Document semantics of MCP. So this should be already fixed. Oh, there's a fix for this anyways. Okay, so this should be already LGTM'd. I'll follow up on this one. This should pretty much go in very soon. Add cluster RBAC config and deprecate RBAC config. I'm trying to remember the context on this one after. Yeah.
That is in flight. So the second issue, there's a PR for, I don't think it's been merged yet, for documentation. And then they have to make sure the release notes document the change.
Okay.
So that's doing fine.
All right. So performance tuning, you're not working particularly on this bug, I think, but you have been looking at
I've been looking at aspects of it. So far, nothing major, just because of how many clients we in practice have. I've been working on tooling mostly so that we can characterize it. That'll be more useful in larger deployments in 1.2 when that becomes required. I think the important thing here is we can answer questions that people have. So for demo installs, and I think typically what we're going to see for 1.1, it's fine. But then if the question was, how far can it scale? How many pilots or mixtures can I connect?
I think the more interesting questions is going to be around the number of configurations that we can push through the system.
It's a function of both. Right? It's going to be how many watches versus how much configuration. It'll also be, we're not using, we don't have the Kubernetes service registry integrated with Galley at this point. Once that lands, that's a 1.2 work item. Once that lands, then performance will be more critical because those are not user authored and they're potentially higher churn.
Okay.
Larger in number. Yeah, this one here.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a well-known.
Oh, sorry, not this one. There's another one that's for 1.2. There's a handful of issues, and there's a few emails about our scoping of resources.
Yeah.
That's not going to make it for 1.1.
Yeah.
It's related to the cluster versus namespace RBAC, also the config groups. So if we're going to make these changes, they're potentially breaking unless and they're invasive to the runtime components. We could hide that complexity in Galley. There's the idea of something like a service entry is really cluster scoped. We want it to be cluster scoped, so we have to introduce something new there. Gateway is possibly cluster scoped, whereas virtual service and destination remote namespaced.
Yeah.
And making that consistent across all of our config.
Okay.
Which requires introducing new CRDs and deprecating old CRDs.
Yeah, which makes me think that having Galley in the system for that is going to be very helpful for doing these things, right?
Yes, we can hide. It'll be easier to hide that complexity in Galley than to push it down to the components.
Okay. So that concludes the.
So, quick question about replacing namespace for the cluster scopes. Would be a replacement or would that be an addition?
It would be an addition.
It would be an addition.
Logically, we're replacing. We would want people to move to the cluster scope version, but practically, CRDs or CRD. Some of the CRD metadata is immutable, so we can't change the scope. You'd have to ask people to delete and then recreate configuration, which is not good.
Yeah, I think the regular deprecation cadence needs to apply to the current set of configurations, regardless of whether they are getting replaced with the almost exact same thing, right, in a cluster scope. So my mental model is, okay, we introduced the new CRDs that we think are the right thing. They live side by side with the old thing. And the system runs that way, like in dual mode way, until the deprecation of the old stuff is complete. And then we get only on the new plan. That gives time for people to migrate. At the same time, making this work cleanly is very easier with Galley rather than trying to do it with Pilot and Mixer or individual components. So that means I think the ideal timeline for this is, look, we can start introducing this in 1.2, right? The new CRD comes in online in 1.2. We deprecate the old one in 1.2 as well. Galley becomes the default model in 1.2, default ingestion mode for 1.2, right? And in 1.3, Galley is the only mode for ingesting config. And either in 1.3 or maybe in a subsequent release, depending on the cadence, the deprecated stuff goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will be the right model.
Cool.
Right. Okay. So in terms of other work, the client libraries was essentially that work is released. So if somebody's interested in picking up some interesting work, that's up for grabs. Istio-Codel. So I think we went through that. Right. So is there anything else to add there? Okay. All right. Any other topics to discuss? Anything else?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'm part of a group at Salesforce that's adopting Istio, and we kind of had a couple kind of miscellaneous things. The first one really is, what's kind of the best mode of communication? It seems like Rocket Chat is essentially a black hole for questions. So I didn't know if the mailing list, I guess, is the best avenue, or.
So I think as a user, the mailing, Rocket Chat, I'm not sure how well it's staffed at this point, but I think the mailing lists are generally where people ask questions and get more information, right? I see more activity there. As a user, I think you may get more traction there. If you want to contribute to the code, we can discuss about it separately.
Okay. And then, so it sounds like most of the usable config stuff is intended to land in 1.2. Is that right?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, sorry, as far as Galley goes, sorry. So like the new config pipeline before it's actually kind of consumable, is the target for that 1.2?
So for 1.1, the target is, so we are following the standard release cadence, and in the release in that parlance, the Galley is going to be alpha in 1.1, which means it's going to be off by default, right? There's going to be a flag that allows you to enable that, but functionally you shouldn't see any changes, right? So if you are seeing a change, that's a problem. So in 1.2, so it's going to go to the next release cadence, right, and or release step. And it's going to be on by default, but you'll be able to turn it off, right? And the next release is going to be the only way for ingesting config. But in all of these cases, Galley should be pretty much invisible from a functional standpoint.
Okay, so the intent is all the config, essentially from a user standpoint, stays essentially the same, right? Like virtual service and destination roles and all that. It's a matter of just where it gets ingested.
Yes.
From, right? Okay. Gotcha. So, and then one of the other questions we had was around, setting global defaults versus, cluster level thing or service specific things. So, ideally, there's a lot of things that we would like to set, at a global level and not have to redefine everywhere. Is there any, move towards that? It seems like, kind of the CRDs in general, it seemed like they were kind of designed at different times and evolved. So some of them have support for that. So I guess the TLS related ones kind of have like the mesh level config, and then service specific ones and others don't. So is there?
So yeah, so we really want to fix this problem. Like, so there are a couple of problems in the system, right? One of them is our configuration is a bit too well-grained, like too grained. So it's like we are using very, very small pieces of config that needs to like fit well together, right? And that's more of a semantic structural problem with the configs themselves. One idea to fix that one was why don't we create a higher level configuration, like we were calling the service config. And you create one of those things, it maps to a bunch of like smaller configurations underneath the covers. It's like the standard Kubernetes operator pattern, if deploy a high level config, and apart from that, we also have this API governance work that tries to align the APIs closer together, trying to make sure that we use the same nomenclature, the features fit well together. So, but it's going to be an ongoing process, right? I don't think we're going to have one single solution fixing everything.
Okay, yeah, and I don't know if I may have just missed the document, but is there much info out yet on that higher level config design or anything, or is that still really early?
It is really aspirational at this point. We really want to get this done, but it always gets kind of deprioritized. We always have bigger fish to fry. But yeah, I think fundamentally at some point we need to get to that. It is really something that we want to do, and I think it's going to improve the usability of the system quite a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
I'd say if you have specific examples of something that's not easily doable today, that would be really great to capture in either the mailing list or GitHub issue, because the pattern we tend to follow is we let things accumulate till we really understand the problem before we try to create a solution for it.
Okay.
We know I've seen instances of that with there's some discussion around having a container resource so you can batch things together. That's kind of like what I was just talking about, but we don't know still what that looks like. So there's a lot of discussion around that, but I think we're still in the requirements gathering phase.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think one of the kind of underlying things that kept coming up in config stuff we were looking at is, there's a lot of detailed config stuff exposed by Envoy, and then Istio is, I guess it has opinions on that and exposes some of it. And so where do you draw the line for what's exposed and what's not? Is the intent to expose every dial and knob that Envoy provides, or because there's basically things like the retry on policies right now that's hard coded, and being able to configure that would be nice. Just basically like TCP keep alive, things like that. So I don't know what the strategy is long term, I guess, for because every new thing gets added in Envoy. There's extra work that gets added in on the Istio side, I guess, to duplicate that.
Yeah, so I think so as the config work group, I'm a bit wary of trying to put too much emphasis on fixing the particular group's configurations, mainly because they are the experts in that. Right? Networking team is the expert on this, and they actually they're talking to customers through a much tighter feedback loop. So I'm gonna defer to them for these kinds of decisions,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
But as the general config story, yes, I think the desire would be to have a common, coherent configuration model that's easy to use, right? So.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think that's all we had on our open question list so far.
All right.
Thanks.
Good. All right. Anything else, folks? All right, then. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.